Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Her Faith Inspires podcast, where we address cultural issues through the lens of scripture. I'm excited to talk with you today about the promises of God and reclaiming the rainbow. This is my first solo episode in a couple of weeks, and I wanted to make sure that I squeezed in some of my amazing guests who are promoting their books right now. And since they are so kind to come on my show, I want to work with them to get the word out about their great resourceful books. If you haven't listened to those episodes yet, please go back and listen. I have more guests with great content coming up in the next few months. And I look forward to sharing those guests with you because I'm careful who I have on the podcast. And I would say all of these guests have books out that you can add to your home library. We have a home library here, and my boys are constantly going through it. One of my boys puts like 20 books in his room at one time, and I always tell him, you're not going to read all of those at once. So if somebody else wants to read them, you're going to have to take the ones you're not reading and share. But I'd rather have that than not read at all. So these books, you'll appreciate them. So be on the lookout for those guests. I want to do something new and start my solo episodes because I can't really start my guest episodes with this new segment, but I want to start my solo episodes with a fun segment called Between the Lines, things that you won't get with my regular content on apologetics and worldview, but stuff that you might be interested in. There are some things that I go through as a mom that I want to talk about on my podcast, but I don't know, those things just aren't really worth making a full episode out of. And then there are also new adventures that I'm starting this spring, and I want to take you with me on that journey as well. So here's my first ever segment called Between the Lines. I'm going to share two things. I'm going to share a mom thing, and then I'm going to share a new adventure that we're getting ready for over here in this house. In my opinion, it's kind of dangerous, but you can be the judge of that. Okay. I'm going to say it's dangerous and you're going to find out why. But some of you are going to be like, really? You think that's dangerous? Yeah. If I can get hurt in any way, there's a danger to it. So, first, the mom thing. So, as some of you know, my boys are 21, 19, and 15. And it's so funny because when I started this podcast, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And my oldest was around the same age as my youngest now. And it goes by like that. It flew. Nobody's moving out yet. Everyone is still at home for now. But I find myself getting really, really sad that at the fact that they're getting older, where I legit cry about it like out of the blue. Some days I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm so excited for them in the future. And this is what, we raised them to be good boys and to be able to live in this world without worrying about them making bad decisions. And then there are moments when it just hits me and I'm like, oh, and I look like a completely emotional, over the top, crazy mom. But here's the thing. I just, my middle son, he has a girlfriend, his first one, and she is a gem. I'm telling you, I started praying for them, for their spouses when I was pregnant with them. So I can't ask for a better girl for my boy. But I also know that he is in love with this girl and he's like, she's the one for me. That means he's going to be moving out. Like, I wouldn't say it's going to be a real long time. My youngest is a freshman and he's going to graduate in 3 years. I know how fast that goes because I have two older boys. And my youngest is going to be driving next year. And we listen to audibles in our car every morning. We're listening to Bonhoeffer right now, which is like 20 something hours long. I don't recommend it unless you want to hang in there. But it's hard for me. These are hard stages because I'm so used to taking care of them and them being here and talking to them and having them here whenever I want, that to think of it being different is so difficult. And I don't like change. I don't like change in any way. And I never have. So even when we moved here, it was kind of out of my norm and out of my comfort zone to move completely across the country. But it was for reasons that motivated me. Other than that, I wouldn't have done it. So a couple of weeks ago, I posted this, I'm going to read this to you in my Her Faith Inspires Facebook group. Yes, I have a Facebook group. And I shared this with the ladies in there. Quote, 2 nights ago, the reality of my boys growing up hit me hard. I wasn't expecting tears, but they flowed and I couldn't stop them. Something happened that day that made me realize I only have a short period of time before change comes once again. And to be honest, it's a change I've dreaded since I first held my first boy. If you haven't noticed, I hate change. That night, I went to Ecclesiastes 3 and reminded myself that life is a series of cycles. Nothing lasts forever. We get old, our kids grow up, and the cycle of life continues. That's just the way it is. That goes for motherhood, marriage, friendships, careers, and seasons. Life is in a constant state of motion and change even when we're not paying attention. I don't know that there is a comfort in that so much as there must be an acceptance of it. Are the changing seasons God's way of reminding us to make the most of this life He's given to us? Are we to think about how to leave a lasting mark long after we're gone rather than long for nothing to ever change? For the mamas out there who see the season of change in the faces of their 6-year-olds losing teeth and replacing them with bigger ones, or the teenagers with squeaky voices going through puberty, I feel your pain. Here's a reminder that change will come, but God is the one who set the clock. He knows how much we long to hold on to some of these seasons, but He also knows what awaits in the next. He is already there. And so that is true. I did go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and reminded myself that there is a season for every thing under the sun, a time for every season under the sun. And this is one of those seasons. So I say this is one of the first things I'm sharing. You might be like, this is so sad. Why are you sharing this? I share it because I have a hard time finding moms who have been through this to say two things. Okay. And remember, I have a mom and my mother-in-law has been very helpful in this. She's really given me some good advice, but I don't find many other moms. I have to Google moms who grieve the process of their children growing up because I'm like, anybody have anything out there for us? But here's what I find that is hard for older mothers to say to us. I get it. I was there and it's going to be better than you think. Like I said, there's some moms, but there's not a lot of moms. I think you can do both. I think you can say it's hard. It's hard. I get it. You're going to grieve. Give yourself time to grieve. Give yourself space to grieve, but also know that it doesn't end there. Okay. So that's one thing. Most ladies tell me it's fine. And I'm not thinking about my boys, growing up or the next stage of life correctly. Like you're not thinking about it right. I agree that I'm not thinking about it right. However, I haven't been here before. I do think that there are a lot of moms who grieve this process, and I think it's okay to acknowledge that. On the other hand, now here's the big one. I have a friend who lost her son when he was only 19 in a tragic accident, and she told me not to mourn the good things in life. Don't mourn for things that shouldn't be mourned over. And I remind myself of her words all the time because I know she would love to see her son grow up, get married, have kids, and go through the stages of, being a husband and a father. So I am trying to learn how to be realistic and reasonable. Okay. I think her words are very helpful. And I think of Ecclesiastes. This is the way of life. Getting older, growing up, our kids are never going to be the age that they are now. So even your moms who are like, you have babies, you have toddlers, it's hard. I can attest to that. Those are tiring, exhausting years. But I know that those tiring, exhausting years do come to an end, and parenthood looks differently eventually, where it's not so exhausting, but you have a new season. You enter into a new season, and I will be entering into a new season as well. And that's just how life is. Kids get older, they grow up, they get married, and they give you grandchildren. So there's a balance to this grieving process. And one thing I hate is I hate being irrational. I can tell when I'm being emotional and then I start to get irrational and then I'm unreasonable and I hate it. I have to tell myself, reel it in, Shanda. So I think we can acknowledge the sadness of a part of life coming to an end, a season, but we can also be logical and say, I get that's how God created this. This is His created order. And I don't want to be so sad looking back that I don't enjoy the moment that I'm in. And so, and that can go, you could also look so forward to the next season you don't enjoy the season that you're in because all seasons come to an end. So from one mom to another who may or may be experiencing the same thing now, or maybe you will experience it soon. I think we can do both. I think we can go in our room and we can cry and tell the Lord, I'm just sad right now. I understand you've designed it this way, but I'm sad right now. But also help me to hold on to the fact that you've created it to be such. And I I'm going to rejoice in your faithfulness because you brought my son a great, wonderful woman, and my boys are growing up to serve you. So let that be a comfort to you. That's what I'm going through right now in motherhood. Here's the adventure. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you know I like lattes. I post my latte almost every day because it's like the highlight of my morning. And I always put 1 tablespoon of honey in my latte. Well, since I use so much honey, I had this bright idea that I would become a beekeeper. So your girl took a class last fall. I enlisted back up my oldest son, Wyatt. He likes animals, and I know that's not an animal, but critters. So he took the class with me, and we're going to make this, get our beehives ready and keep bees together. We're prepping our yard and a space for the bees. My husband already got it all taken care of. We have to put an electric fence around the bees because the bears will come and they will knock over the hives to get the honey and then it'll kill all the bees. So we're working on all of that. I don't know what that's going to look like. That's why I said this is a dangerous thing. I mean, I'm taking on a dangerous adventure besides the fact that I could get stung. I don't want to get stung. I'm going to wear the suit and everything. So if you follow me on social media, eventually I'll post that when I'm out there trying to keep bees. But honestly, I'm going to make my oldest son go first. He can take the jabs from these bees. And I'm hoping to get the honey out of it. So we're going to try this and I'll keep you posted. Next to the hives, we're planting fruit trees. We just got apples and plums and peaches and nectarines. And then we're going to plant some bushes, blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. And I don't know how all of this is going to go. Last year, I did start, the sourdough. I'm not looking at being a homesteader. I just want some fruit that I don't have to pay as much for. But we live in the foothills, so we're going to have to fight off some deer and bears and stuff like that. And by fight off, I mean, we're going to put an electric fence around this stuff. So hopefully next year we can harvest our honey. It takes about that long for the bees to get their hives ready, but that's the big adventure. So this is the first of Between the Lines. And I hope that you guys enjoy this segment and I'll put something else in to the next solo episode. All right. So let's get to today's topic. We are talking about the promises of God and reclaiming the rainbow. So, we are going to talk about the promises of God and what that looks like. Here are the three things that we're going to address and we're going to answer. First, what are the promises of God? How do you know if God has promised you something? Two, what is the significance of Noah and the ark? And three, why do we need to think of reclaiming the rainbow? And how do we do that? So let's look first at the promises of God. A lot of times you'll see people post on social media about what God has promised, and they're always positive things. But I want to get you to think a little bit differently about that. First, let's look at the definition. This is just an Oxford definition that says a promise is a declaration or assurance that one will do a particular thing or that a particular thing will happen. So when I was thinking on this today, I was also thinking that a promise can be a negative as well. It doesn't have to just be like, I promise I'm going to be there for you. I promise I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I promise that if you abide in me, you'll bear much fruit. Those are promises. Don't get me wrong. And those are positive things. But a promise can go either way. And we often think of promises in the positive, or at least I do. I've always thought of them that way. But that's not always the case. There are many promises from God in the Bible. And when God makes a promise, he is pledging that something will or will not be done or given or come to pass. And Numbers 23:19 says, God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. He has said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? When God says it, it's as good as done. From what I see, sometimes the promises of God are contingent upon our action. If you do this, then God will do this. Or if you do this, God will not do this, as in the case of Adam. God's promises go all the way back to the Old Testament. They're not just the New Testament, but we see God's promise to Abraham in the Abrahamic covenant. Through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. We have the Mosaic covenant. God told Moses that if his people obey him, there would be life and prosperity. If they disobeyed him, there would be death. The word if is a conditional clause, meaning that it's dependent on the event or on a condition. God's promises go both ways. There is a blessing of following the Lord if you do what he says, or there is a consequence when you disobey him. So, what I want to talk about today is the Noahic covenant. In our core class on Sunday morning, that's just a fancy way to say Sunday school. For those of you who are old school, like, what's core? We go during the first service, we go to the core class, and then we'll go to the second service. But in the class, we're talking about Hebrews 11, all the faith giants of Hebrews 11. And last Sunday was Noah. And then we went back to Genesis and really looked at the life of Noah, which was a great conversation and a deep dive. Noah was the one that was part of this unconditional covenant. So, as I said before, the other covenants, like the Abrahamic covenant and the Mosaic covenant, are conditional because both parties have to hold up to their end of the bargain in order for the covenant promise to be experienced. And I'm kind of speaking in basic terms here for understanding, not necessarily complete theological terms, but the Noahic covenant was unconditional. God will not flood the earth ever again, a global flood, no matter what, no matter how bad men become. So he will never destroy the earth by flood again. So let's recap the narrative of Noah's Ark, because I don't like to just tell you what summarize it in my own words. I don't think that that goes far enough, so that I'm going to look through different parts of chapter 6, 7, and 8. And you should always, if you want to learn more, go back to your own Bible and fact check me and make sure that this aligns to scripture. And don't just take my word for it. But I'm going to give you scripture and then explain. Okay, so let's recap the narrative of Noah's Ark before we get into the details of like the rainbow and God's promises. Genesis 6, 1-8 says this: When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So here are a few points made in these chapters leading up to the Noahic covenant. We haven't gotten to the Noahic covenant yet. We are going to get there. So first, man's wickedness grieved God, and the only one on the earth that was righteous and blameless was Noah. Noah had a wife and 3 sons. His 3 sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And each son had a wife. And those would be the 8 people on the ark, the 8 human beings. Chapter 6, 11-14 goes on to say, Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I would destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. And then God goes on to give Noah all the details and the measurements of the ark. And you can read those specifically in Genesis. That's what I love about the Bible. The Bible is very specific about people, dates, locations, and even measurements. You have the measurements of the ark. You have the details of the Holy of Holies and the priests and the things that they eat and drink out of. You have measurements of the temple and the different types of tools, and you have the different types of wood. And it's very specific, is my point. And when you look at fairy tales and myths, this is just a side note coming off the top of my head, they don't get specific about those things. The most specific, I guess, we got as far as materials were concerned was the three little pigs: wood, straw, and brick. Okay. If you want to get technical, but you see what I'm saying. There's no specific dates, times, people, locations like there is the Bible. It's a historical document. Okay. So think about that and think about how good that is that God has done that for us. Here's what we must consider out of this passage here. As far as we know, it hadn't rained on the earth before. So the rest of the world, to the rest of the world, Noah probably looked like a big nut job. I mean, he's like, we need to build this huge ark that's 3 stories tall and it's the size of a football field and a half. I mean, even if there was a large body of water nearby, logically speaking, people would be like, you don't need that big of a boat for that lake over there. But it to Noah's faith was great because it didn't make sense in the natural. And that's the point. When God calls us to do something, that's what it requires: trust, right? And then another thing to realize is that Noah obeyed God without question. And I just am like, gosh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I would have been like, well, this doesn't make sense. This is too big of a boat. How are you going to get animals in here? Do you expect me to like lead the male and female elephant in? And what about the male and female tigers and bears? Ain't nobody got time for that. But they trusted. And his family got on the ark with him, which also required a level of faith from them, his 3 sons and their wives. They had to trust that what Noah said was true. So they also displayed faith. And I think that that's encouraging because Noah's sons followed his lead and they were saved. So even when other people think you're crazy, God has a way of getting that message to your family. And as long as you are faithful. And then chapter 7 starts with God telling Noah and his family to go into the ark because he will flood the earth in 7 days. That means they spent 7 days inside the ark with the door open and no rain yet. I'm wondering, I always think about the backstory. Were people walking by the ark and they're like, what are you nut jobs doing sitting in the ark waiting for it to rain? What is rain, by the way? And that alone is like, I didn't realize that until we were talking about it in our core class, that they were in there for 7 days. And so verse 5 shows the contrast between Noah and the rest of the world because it says, quote, and Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. That's why Noah is in Hebrews 11, the faith giants chapter, the hall of faithers. It's like, yeah, he deserves to be in there because it's so contrary to the culture of the time. But isn't that how it is to be a Christian? Like you're always contrary to the culture. Verses 15 and 16 of chapter 7 say, they went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. Here's a few things to note from this. First, Noah did not shut the door. God did. This is very similar to the language that Jesus uses in John 10:9 through 10 when he says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Another thing is, I don't know that logistically Noah would have been able to close the door from the inside anyway. But besides that, God didn't give Noah that job. And that shows the beginning of judgment for those who rejected the call to enter. I think that that's very symbolic with the free gift of salvation and the time that we are given to make the decision to follow the Lord. And as Jesus said, enter through the door. He is our way to salvation now. On the ark, going in through that door was their way to escape judgment. And while Noah and his family sat on that ark for 7 days in preparation for the flood, people still had the opportunity until God closed the door. So now we get into chapter 8, and the rain stopped, the water receded, and the ark has landed. And verses 20 through 22, we read this. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. And then it goes to chapter 9 and it continues with this Noahic covenant. It starts in 8, says this. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. You hear that repetitive language? God said it many times. This is the sign of my covenant between me and all flesh, me and all flesh. So it's not just human beings, it's all flesh. God has promised to never destroy all flesh because he did destroy all flesh on the earth. That's why he had two of every kind of animal and some more than two come on the ark so they could reproduce and populate the earth again. And so this is where we get the rainbow. To this day, it is the symbol of God's promise to never again destroy the earth. And it is only a promise to every living creature of all flesh. The rainbow was created for this reason. We're talking about a reminder to both us and God that the earth will never again be destroyed by a worldwide flood. That is what it's here for. So let's look and talk about reclaiming the rainbow. So what is it? So when you look at just the rainbow, we say, okay, it's a colorful, arc, this arc of different colors. But that's okay. So what? It doesn't tell us anything, right? When you get specific about the origin of the rainbow, it is a created thing. It is a sign of God's covenant, God's promise with all flesh to never flood the earth again. And that means a lot because when you see, regional floods or you see floods specific to certain locations, it's God saying that will never happen again over all of the earth, which even a regional flood doesn't do justice to what this global flood was, and obviously the repercussions, because all flesh died except for those on the ark. But these words were spoken thousands of years ago. But the sign of the rainbow is seen throughout all the earth, even now, whenever there are rain clouds to remind us of that promise. And God says, I put it there so I will remember. He's also saying that's how it's going to be. It's a remembrance to me, and it's a remembrance of my promise to you. And you might wonder, well, is it still a sign of God's promise, even if people don't believe that that's what the rainbow's for? What if people don't acknowledge that that's a sign of God's promise? A lack of belief doesn't make something untrue. On the other hand, just because someone believes something doesn't mean it is true. It's either true or not, regardless of who believes it, or how many people believes it, or if it's popular. The rainbow is either a sign of God's promise, as the Bible says, or it isn't, regardless of what you, me, or anyone else believes about it. So when you look at what it represents today, you only have to go back as far as 1978. The rainbow became a symbol of gay pride. And this isn't, when you think about it, it's not that long ago. I mean, never before was the rainbow seen as a symbol for homosexuality before 1978. And Gilbert Baker designed the flag for the homosexual community in San Francisco. According to gotquestions.com, each color meant something. Hot pink meant sexuality. Red meant life, orange meant healing, yellow was the sun, green, nature, turquoise are indigo, harmony, and violet, spirit. And subsequent designs sported seven and then six colors. Rainbow flags and banners, as used by the LGBT plus community, represent diversity, hope, and social action. And I link that article for you in the show notes. So if you want to go back and read more on it, you can. But there are other rainbow flags that have nothing to do with homosexuality. But no matter if you want to equate it to a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the LGBT community, or print it on a cute backpack, the rainbow is God's creation. He owns it. Some will shrug off the rainbow as purely scientific and say, well, a rainbow is formed when sunlight interacts with water droplets through a process called refraction. Yes. And rain occurs when rain clouds form, and lightning is seen before thunder is heard because the speed of light travels faster than the speed of sound. That doesn't mean God did not create those things and those systems and those processes through which we experience them. And then I'll be honest, I have felt myself become less fond of the rainbow over the years because of all the pride flags and the bombardment of the LGBT ideology that we see in June, which is coming in a few short months. And when I see someone with a rainbow bracelet or backpack, I'm like, I wonder if they're into the literal rainbow and, the beauty of the colors, or if they're sending some other message. But I would encourage Christians to reclaim the rainbow. And you do that by teaching your kids about the Noahic Covenant and the difference between a conditional covenant and an unconditional covenant, like the Noahic Covenant. So they understand the rainbow represents the goodness and the faithfulness of God and his promises, regardless of sinful man. Isn't it ironic that God destroyed all flesh because of wickedness, and the rainbow that he used to show us his promise is being used to represent wickedness? I mean, that's the way the devil works. He always takes the good things that God creates and perverts them. The reason that we must reclaim the rainbow and teach our kids about what it really represents is because every generation from mine on down has seen it represented in some way that is opposed to God and his commandments. If we give up the rainbow and stop telling kids about it today, we are surrendering it to a wicked generation. And it's our job to remember God's promises and hold on to them and teach them diligently to the generations after us. I know things like the rainbow might seem simple and insignificant in the grand scheme of cultural topics. There's a lot going on out there, but I think it's good to talk about these things and remind ourselves of God's creation, his promises, and our responsibility in communicating that message to our children and those in our sphere of influence is not insignificant. And when you think about it, the rainbow isn't insignificant either. It reflects the character and the nature of God. And that is the reason that we should hold on tight and make sure that we reclaim it. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and review, as that helps the podcast get into the earbuds of others. And then next month, I'll be in the Southwest Georgia area at the Go Girls Weekend, speaking to moms and leaders on the importance of training our girls up under a biblical worldview through the process of discipleship. I'm also going to take that acronym that I'm teaching during that weekend and turn it into a freebie for next month's newsletter. So if you are not subscribed to the newsletter, go to shandafulbright.com and do that so you can get that monthly worldview in 3 minutes newsletter and the freebies that come with it. If you have any questions for me, you can email me at hello@shandafulbright.com. And like always, I'll catch you on the next one.